Hello Canada, welcome back to another edition of the Canadian Citizen Journal. I'm your host, alias Tagai. Well guys, bombshells are going off left and right. Democracy Watch just did a press release and there's a little bit more information that got dropped by Sam Cooper over at the Bureau. Protect that man. Protect this guy too actually, but Sam Cooper particularly. He's been dropping a pile of bombs along with a fair amount of other people, but he's kind of the main guy. He's put all of this together, and a lot of other people are starting to come out of the woodwork backing what he's saying and wondering why it took so long for us to actually do something about it. Okay, so this video is a little long. I'm just going to try and break down little pieces of it with kind of context and, of course, my opinion. But I want you to watch the whole thing. I want you to listen carefully to how he words things so that you understand how deep and how many hurdles he had to go across. This is going to expose a lot of people. And this is just the beginning. This is just the beginning. If this government falls, which is, it's sure looking like it is. It's sure looking like it is. Thank God. I'm praying that we get a major majority of something to clean this mess up. There's going to be heads rolling. And the corruption is insane. So without further ado, let's get this video up and rolling. So I saved some time here for you guys.
Good morning. My name is Duff Conacher. I'm co-founder of Democracy Watch. And Democracy Watch is one of Canada's leading democratic reform corporate responsibility advocacy organizations. I am here today to announce that Democracy Watch is taking the next step in its years-long process to hold the Trudeau government and Prime Minister Trudeau and the Trudeau cabinet accountable for pressuring the Attorney General back in the fall of 2018 to intervene and stop the prosecution of SNC-Lavalin. And Democracy Watch has chased after the RCMP right back since these revelations were made in February 2019, filed access to information requests and pushed on those requests, and has had now more than 3,600 pages of internal investigation documents disclosed by the RCMP. And what those documents show...
Okay, it costs money for every one of those documents, and the way the system's set up is you've got to be very particular on what you're after, or they'll send it back saying, that's too broad, don't waste our time. So not only are you fighting how well you have to word it, you're also fighting the system itself, because the documentation is buried amongst documentation. These are politicians, and they're corrupt politicians, so they know how to do it. And every bureaucracy has been infiltrated. This is hurdles, brick walls, burning buildings, moats. We all have to fight like heck to get at anything, let alone the fact that everybody we run into corruption or bias. Move on.
Is that the RCMP did a weak, incomplete investigation. They only interviewed 4 of 15 key witnesses, and they trusted the public statements of everyone involved in pressuring the Attorney General, Jody Wilson-Raybould, at the time. And they also changed the standard that they used for determining whether there had been an obstruction of justice, using an incorrect legal standard for making that assessment. They also essentially didn't give any updates for years. And as I mentioned with our access to information requests, we had to pursue them and finally got full disclosure after more than 2 years of the internal investigation records. As well, the RCMP essentially characterized everything that the people said who were involved in pressuring the Attorney General from the Prime Minister on down in a favorable way, while doubting the claims and constantly essentially tilting the investigation in favor of not prosecuting anyone, and then made a secret, behind closed doors and very questionable decision not to prosecute anyone. Given the evidence, and given as well that the RCMP did not apply the correct legal standard in terms of reviewing the evidence and determining whether there had been an obstruction of justice, and also given that the RCMP did not consider in its investigation whether the Prime Minister or anyone else had committed a breach of trust, Democracy Watch is today filing an application in Ontario Court of Justice for court approval to pursue a private prosecution of these allegations of obstruction of justice and breach of trust. And that's what I'm here today to announce. And Democracy Watch's position has always been during the investigation that the RCMP should not have been investigating this matter, should not be investigating any matter involving federal cabinet ministers, because the RCMP commissioner, the deputy commissioner, and the heads of every division of the RCMP are all chosen by and serve at the pleasure of the Prime Minister and the cabinet. And as a result, they lack independence and are vulnerable to political interference.
Which we've seen. We've seen that. Look at Lucky. What a waste. Corrupt right to the bone. Look at how she tried to use the horrendous acts that happened out east when a guy used a pretend cop car on a spree. The government was working with her to try to lie to the people to help them push their hunting rifle ban. These people are corrupt. When they are appointed, and it's like the media, when you are fed and watered and handed dollar bills in a house, they don't turn on them. They protect them. This is what we're up against. This is Democracy Watch. You can check them out. You can look at all of their books, find out where all their money comes from. They have nothing to hide at all. There's no millionaires behind them. This is regular people donating, and people like him sacrificing his own wages because he's got spending huge amounts of time working on this, as well as his entire team. So kudos out to Democracy Watch because they rock. They really do. Now, just going to keep moving on.
And what should have happened is that a special prosecutor should have been chosen, not by the ruling party cabinet, not by the RCMP commissioner who serves at the pleasure of that cabinet, but through a fully independent process. And that special prosecutor should have both directed the investigation and also issued a public statement at the conclusion of the investigation concerning prosecutions. And if there was a decision not to prosecute anyone, that would have been disclosed. And obviously, if there had been a prosecution, that would have been pursued in court. Another sign of the RCMP's lack of independence and weak investigation in this situation is that the RCMP accepted the Trudeau cabinet's very restricted order in terms of what cabinet documents could be disclosed to the RCMP for its investigation, and also what Jody Wilson-Raybould, former Attorney General, and others could say about the situation and the pressuring by the Prime Minister and others who were acting at the direction of the Prime Minister.
They silenced her. And Phil Pott. They silenced him. Anybody that opposes him, they silence him. I urge you to watch the Chavez video with Jordan Peterson, and it'll open up your eyes to how scared some people are when they go against the machine. The government is powerful. They're powerful enough. But when they're corrupt to the bone, that is a completely different animal. Moving on.
And what the RCMP should have done, and if there was a special prosecutor who was independent, they probably would have done, is they would have applied to court to get access to those internal cabinet communications, which are obviously key evidence concerning whether the obstruction of justice or breach of trust occurred. So Democracy Watch's position now that the investigation is over is that a judge in an open court hearing all the testimony from all the witnesses and also considering all the evidence would make a decision as to whether a prosecution should be approved and Democracy Watch allowed to pursue this private prosecution. So that's what we are going to be applying for today in the Ontario Court of Justice. And hopefully the courts will recognize and our documents that are filed with the application point out all of the weak and incomplete aspects of the RCMP's investigation. And again, importantly, that the RCMP utilized the incorrect legal standard for determining whether there had been an obstruction of justice. They use a standard that would require that there be a corrupt intent by the Prime Minister or others, and that is not the legal standard for obstruction of justice. The standard is simply that it was willful and that there was intent to do it. So we will be...
I'm going to show you evidence of that here right after this interview.
Hopefully meeting with the Justice of the Peace of the Ontario Court of Justice today. We will certainly be filing the application. The meeting may come later. And then the process is the Justice of the Peace will decide whether the evidence and arguments that we are putting forward warrant what is called a pre-enquête hearing. And at that hearing, we would present our case in brief, essentially, and that hearing would then determine whether a private prosecution can go ahead. What can happen is that the Attorney General of Ontario, a lawyer representing the Crown Counsel of the Attorney General of Ontario, can step in and take over the prosecution. So that is possible that could happen, and then the Attorney General's office in Ontario would have the discretion to stop the prosecution if they so wished. We hope that that process will also be done through a special prosecutor, because the Attorney General of Ontario is obviously a politician from a political party, the Progressive Conservatives, and we don't want the rest of the steps of this investigation and accountability process for this situation to be tainted in any way by partisanship.
Okay. The Ford government, they're minions of the Trudeau NDP Liberal coalition. There it seems to be a lot of evidence, a lot of trails and cookie crumbs are leading to these battery plants that were built, which means that Ford is involved. Now, personally, I don't like Ford. His brother Rob had more morals and dignity in his pinky than Doug Ford could ever dream of thinking he has. Period. He's an abuser of the system, and he's the true definition of a politician. His brother was a citizen. He was you, he was me, he was the regular guy. He said things that, yes, came off a little abrupt, but look what he did to the city of Toronto. I couldn't believe the difference from when he came in power to not even 3 years after he got voted out. And that whole thing was more corruption. Believe me, it's deep. We're just going to move on.
In the way that we believe it has been tainted by partisanship to date. I welcome any questions that you have. Thank you.
In your investigation of this, what was one thing that particularly took so long to get the documents, but were you able to find any reason why this is going on over 6 years ago now, why this investigation took so long, especially since they didn't interview all that many witnesses?
Yes. Well, the chronology in brief is that there were meetings very early on with Jody Wilson-Raybould in May of 2019 and September 2019, and meetings with others, not too much after that, initial meetings. But the other witnesses, for example, Jessica Prince, the former chief of staff for Jody Wilson-Raybould, was not actually fully interviewed until October 2020. Neither was Jane Philpott, a minister and friend and confidant of Jody Wilson-Raybould, not interviewed till October 2020. The final interview with Jody Wilson-Raybould took place in February of 2020. The Ethics Commissioner report came out in August 2019, which revealed pretty much everything that had gone on, and as did the House Committee hearings. The RCMP is still hiding some evidence in the records we have disclosed. There are statements from Jody Wilson-Raybould, Jessica Prince, and Jane Philpott that have been redacted that when they're answering key questions about what they thought of the situation, whether it crossed the line, which raises serious questions about why the RCMP is hiding those statements.
And this is a huge tactic. After you muzzle them and you hide everything and make it incredibly difficult to find, you take so much time that it falls into statutes and different laws and rules that say either, oh, this was tried in court once and that's a precedent, and then it gets tossed out, or it's not worth looking at, or there's a statute of limitations on how long after you can actually charge them for. A lot of the convoy, the freedom protesters are running into these types of roadblocks. They purposely they stretched out so much time on purpose to stop any prosecution against these people. Again, laws have to change.
Then what happened was the investigating officer, Sergeant Frederick Penzance, filed his report in March 2021 with the National Command of the RCMP, and then it has not been explained by the RCMP what happened and why they took until January 2023 to make a final decision to not to prosecute anyone. So a year and 9 months went by, and that year and 9 months is a period that has not been explained. RCMP Commissioner Michael Duhem committed to the House of Commons Ethics Committee back in February 2024 to disclose all the internal communications covering that period, and made that commitment in response to a question from an MP. As we disclosed yesterday, the letter that Michael Duhem, RCMP Commissioner, sent to the committee on April 26, 2024 was just over 2 pages and just had a very vague statement about why there had been that delay, and it essentially just said there were other things going on, a change in personnel, and that's why a year and 9 months went by between the final investigation report being filed with National Command in March 2021 and the RCMP National Command final decision in January 2023 to not prosecute anyone. Again, a secret behind closed doors decision that was not disclosed until we finally pushed it out through the Access to Information Act process in June of 2023. Unfortunately, the Ethics Committee gave up and didn't call Michael Duhem back or send him a letter back saying, you committed to giving all the internal communication records, where are they? We probably have a lot of them in the 3,600 pages that Democracy Watch has dug out over the past few years through Access to Information Act requests. But there may be some others hidden, and there is no explanation from the Commissioner. The Commissioner should be asked why he broke his commitment.
Okay, that Access to Information Act, every time you file for one, you got to pay for it. They're not cheap. I think the minimum's $40. And you got to be very particular about what you're asking for, or they'll just come back and say, don't waste my time. That's too broad. So you got to be very particular. So there's a lot of back and forth before you even get your information, and money swinging hands, not from them, always from us, or him in this case, this organization. But then you're also dealing with the corruption and the political will of people within those departments. When you're dealing with the tops being appointed, especially for this long, it dwindles down, and complete departments from the top down are infiltrated. So they'll purposely manipulate what they're sending you, hide you. Plus, you got the government hiding and purposely mixing documents or labeling them in a different manner, or claiming that you can't see them for cabinet confidence, national security, which Trudeau pulls all the time. That's how he buries 90% of his stuff. Oh, it's national security. It has nothing to do with national security. We're going to move on.
To disclose all of those records to the Ethics Committee when he made that commitment. He made that commitment back in February 27th, 2024.
And if this was to go ahead with an independent prosecution, like you would like, and there was convictions, what could be some of the possible penalties, I suppose, if it did go that far?
The penalties are significant fines and possible jail terms, both for breach of trust and obstruction of justice. So obviously we have to get over the hurdles first of having a court move to a pre-enquête hearing, and then out of that hearing have the court actually issue the warrant and for the charge and the prosecution proceeding, whether it's proceeding with Democracy Watch carrying it as a private prosecution, or the Attorney General of Ontario, hopefully through a very independent process, having a special prosecutor carry it forward. And then obviously it would be an open court hearing, like all criminal cases, or almost all. There obviously are some closed court hearings in some national security cases. And then the judge or jury would be deciding whether what penalty and obviously whether anyone should be convicted. Just to mention one other quick thing about the Special Prosecutor Service. In British Columbia, although the Special Prosecutor is usually chosen by the Attorney General of the province in these kind of cases, at least what happens is that it's not a government lawyer. It's someone chosen from private practice by the Attorney General, and they usually carry these kind of cases when the charge is about someone within the government. It's happened in Ontario as well.
The problem is, which I'm going to show you in a little wee bit, is that they still have to go through the existing prosecutor that's been appointed in order for them to say, okay, we are going to allow an independent inquiry or a prosecutor that is appointed by a completely separate head, not linked to the government, which you'll find here in about 5 minutes. I'm going to show you.
At the federal level, it hasn't happened and should have happened in this case. This should have been handled in a much more independent way.
And I actually wonder if he brought BC up because he knows of a case that should have happened there that didn't.
Rather than having the RCMP commissioner, who again serves at the pleasure of the cabinet and can be fired at any time for any reason, directing this investigation.
Are you concerned that because of the passage of time and, as you can see, the perhaps lots of interest even at the committee level to pursue this to the fullest, that I think the Prime Minister's office is probably interested in this going away and delaying, and that they've actually accomplished that goal, and there's been a loss of faith in the system?
Yes, concerning the delay, this is the great Canadian way, unfortunately, and it's why Democracy Watch is also calling today for a new, fully independent anti-corruption police force to be established. Several other experts have called for this for years as well, because the RCMP has done such a bad job, has such a bad record in these kind of anti-corruption cases, also including cases involving money laundering, which is often tied into corruption. And it's just well documented how
See? These guys know what's going on. This is all being exposed. If you've watched some of my previous podcasts or videocasts, you'd know this. And I apologize for the lighting and some of the camera work and even some of the voice that was going on. I was set up green. I'm starting to get this thing down pat, starting to get the proper equipment, and my studio's starting to get finished. So I apologize for that, but worth the watch. Go back and watch them. There is piles of evidence. We're talking Chinese cartels, mafia, the Mexican drug lords. We are we're known as the world's largest distributor and hedge fund money laundering country in the world. When countries get fentanyl, they trace it to us. We bring in the precursors. Less than 1% of our ports are checked. People within the organizations from the bottom right to the top are involved in this. Sam Cooper has got names, dates, everything. And he's also now working with the American administration. Actually, he's been working with them for quite some time because he needs protection. That's how big this is. National treasure, Sam Cooper. National treasure. And God protect him, because he needs it.
Weak and ineffective their investigations and actions are, in part again because they lack independence from the Prime Minister. And we need a new national anti-corruption police force that is fully independent with a team of fully independent prosecutors. Because what we have is, again, concerning the delay, we have a system where the police often delay things. The government delays giving information to the police in these cases. Years go by and they're hoping that possibly someone will retire from their position or resign, and then the great Canadian way is to let them walk away without any accountability for any alleged wrongdoing. And this needs to stop. Democracy Watch has tracked the overall system. It's very weak and ineffective over the years. International entities like Transparency International have ranked Canada in terms of its overall anti-corruption system, and we're at this recent survey that came out from Transparency International puts Canada at the lowest position world in terms of other comparison to other countries.
How does that feel, Canada? We've become the most corrupt nation on the planet. How does that feel? Does that kick the pride right out of you? Does that make you want to go out and boo at some more hockey games? It's not them. It's us. It's us. We've got to look inside. I feel really bad for the Liberal Party. They've been great at times. Obviously not when his dad was in, because that just destroyed our nation. It took us 40 years to fix it. But there's great politicians, and they all went running when they found out that Justin Trudeau was running for the leadership, and they saw the corruption already starting on trying to get him elected. And once he was elected, that party's never been the same. and they're on the media all the time, real media, not mainstream, not legacy. They've been barking and screaming at the top of their lungs that their party has been completely taken over, and it's not the same. So don't get me wrong when I get mad and I all those liberals and NDP, this party needs to be completely removed off the Canadian political map and rebuilt from the ground up. And in the meantime, we need to start putting in serious laws like other nations have done that have followed the Westminster system. But they put in piles of anti-corruption laws and protections to citizens. And we haven't. Instead, our politicians, especially the Laurentian elite who have ruled over us for the largest proportion of political party leadership is from them in our nation. And like I said, there were good ones and there were horrible ones. And same thing with the Conservatives. It runs. But we need to fix this. We need to fix this.
That it's ever been at. And it's because of these kind of situations where the world and international entities look at our system and say, this system lets people get away with wrongdoing through delay, secrecy, lack of accountability. Now we're into, with this application, the judicial system, the Ontario judicial system, where the justices of the peace are appointed by the provincial governments, have some independence and are not serving at the pleasure of the Prime Minister. And so we're hoping that the only considerations will be whether the lines were crossed in terms of the legal standards in the criminal code being violated, that there is enough evidence there to have this heard, as it should have been in the first place, heard by a judge in an open court hearing with everyone testifying publicly and all of the evidence disclosed.
Thank you. This concludes the...
Okay. That's a lot to take in. And like I said, feel free, rewind and listen carefully to what he's saying, because he's bringing together a whole lot of other information that the media is not talking about to prove how difficult it is in order for justice to rule. Now, we're going to move on here to the Bureau. This is Sam Cooper's magazine. Now, you got to subscribe or pay to actually get to his site, but you can still follow him many other different ways, especially through other media outlets. I'm going to read you something that he posted here, and I'm going to try and do it as quickly as I can here, so I don't want this video being too long. Let me blow this up so you can read it with me in case you wanted to. Breaking advocate applies for private prosecution of Trudeau in SNC Lavalin scandal. He shows us, it's a printout. I'm just going to read it to you. Despite Miss Wilson-Rayboux's direct advice to Mr. Trudeau, the evidence showed that her warning was discounted and ignored because her senior staff continued to receive unsolicited entreaties to reconsider her refusal to intervene in the matter. They were calling, texting, faxing, emailing, harassing, which is pressure. Several witnesses testified that the degree to which the company was serious about taking measures to protect its business interests constituted new information that would be presented to the Attorney General. According to the evidence, Ms. Wilson-Raybould had already considered the economic consequences and did not view this information as sufficient to revisit her original decision not to intervene. Mr. Trudeau and several witnesses testified they believed that the Shawcross Doctrine allowed for debate between the Attorney General and cabinet colleagues. Now that's a precedent, and they twisted it, just like they did with the Emergencies Act, to what they thought the law should be, not to what the law actually was, and they get away with this crap. My reading of the doctrine and the governing jurisprudence have led me to a different conclusion. And then the article goes, Democracy Watch, a transparency advocate, announced today that it has filed an application in the Ontario Court of Justice seeking approval to pursue a private prosecution of Prime Minister Justin Trudeau for pressuring then Attorney General Jody Wilson-Raybould in 2018 to halt the prosecution of SNC Lavalin. The application reportedly includes a legal opinion by a retired Superior Court justice, issued on condition of anonymity. He's scared. That's how powerful and corrupt this government is. I'm going to read that one more time. And the RCMP conducted a very superficial, the application reportedly includes a legal opinion by a retired Superior Court justice, issued on condition of anonymity, supporting charges of obstruction of justice and possibly breach of trust. The group alleges that the RCMP failed to investigate the matter properly, allowing Trudeau's office to avoid scrutiny. The RCMP conducted a very superficial investigation into the cabinet's interference, said Duff Conacher, co-founder of Democracy Watch. They didn't interview many key witnesses or obtain critical cabinet records, then decided not to prosecute anyone behind closed doors. We believe a judge must see this evidence in an open court. Newly released RCMP transcripts indicate that senior officials, including Trudeau's then Principal Secretary Gerald Butts, repeatedly pressed Wilson Raybould to override prosecutors and grant SNC-Lavalin a deferred prosecution agreement. Jessica Prince, Wilson Raybould's chief of staff, told investigators that she rebuffed persistent calls from Finance Minister Bill Morneau's chief of staff, Ben Chin, who insisted there had to be a middle ground. Prince also accused PMO advisor Matthew Bouchard of interference, claiming that he tied the government's re-election hopes in Quebec to SNC-Lavalin's fate. And you wonder why he's releasing this high-speed rail. Buy votes. Bankrupt the people, but keep in power. That's all they care. They'll rule, but they'll rule over the ashes. Democracy Watch's will say documents allege that the RCMP applied an improper legal standard for obstruction of justice and never considered breach of trust. Now, it kind of goes on and on and on, which is pretty much what you saw in that interview. So I'm just going to move on. And this is really interesting. While just doing research, I ended up coming across this. Now, this is Sam Cooper, the legend, the man. Protect this guy. He put out what I just read to you. And one of the replies I found very interesting. And I'm doing research into it. And oh my gosh, this is deep. The links are deep. David Drover. I tried to sue Trudeau et al. Over this in the BC Supreme Court in January 2020. The court clerks and the judge obstructed me from filing the lawsuit, so I filed it in an affidavit. That means that it's written, it's in there, and they can't delete it or get rid of it. So they were very smart in doing so. It's 70 pages long, lol. I wrote it as a storybook just exactly for this reason. It's filed in the courts in February 2020 for all to view this. This is not rocket science, folks. There's other goodies in that affidavit as well, which I will be finding. I named at Rachel Notley and at Kathleen Ganley and my former professional association at the ACFE and at the Engineering GOBC, and more in my notice of civil claim filed inside the sworn affidavit. Wakey, wakey, folks, you are at least 6 years behind the times. This is not new information at all. It's funny though. Makes me and my family just gasp with shock at how behind the times you all are and how much you have all been played. Sad, really. Now that's the truth. That's the truth. And that's why you have to like, share, and subscribe. And get the word out. Get the word out. I put all my links. We show all of our information. At least the good ones do. And I know there's a lot of bad ones on there. I read some of them. They just lie. They just lie. I don't do that. And maybe at the time I seem biased. It's only because the NDP Liberals are so corrupt and so far left off socialist field that there is no other party. Don't even look at the Green. What a waste. A complete waste. There is no science behind that party at all. None. Zilch. Nada. So, I just want to show you A little bit of evidence. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of a story, and I'm going to make it quick. I was at a function one time, and there were a couple lawyers. And we were having a good gab. And I threw at them, hey, what do you think of this SNC Lavalin? How come they haven't charged him? Isn't there enough evidence? Before I finished saying that sentence, they were both laughing. And both of them, looking at each other and then looking at me, said, the tape alone should have had Trudeau in court and possibly jail. Let's take a listen. December 18th.
He just wants to understand more at this point why the DPA route isn't being taken up in this route. So he's thinking about bringing in somebody like Bev McLaughlin to give him advice on this, or to give you advice to make, if you want to feel more comfortable that you're not doing anything that's inappropriate or outside the frame of...
I'm 100% confident I'm doing nothing inappropriate.
Yeah. No, but would not be if you decided to use some of these tools under the law. Because I think he feels the government has to have done everything it can before we lose 9,000 jobs in a signature Canadian firm.
Now
Right.
that
So-
was a lie. That was proven to be a lie. All a lie. This is what they were feeding the media. This is what they were trying to feed to Canadians. And they believed it. They sucked it up and they believed it. They literally believed it. That's a lie. The 9,000 jobs. It started off with 3,000 jobs, and it went to 5,000 jobs, and all of a sudden it was at 6, and then it was at 9,000 jobs. That's a lie. That was all a lie. All of it was a lie. Gaslighting you. But she knew better. She knows what's going on. She looked at all the evidence. She knew they were corrupt. She knew she couldn't protect him. That's not her job. Her job is the law. Upholding the law.
So, I'm confident in where I'm at, and my views on SNC and the DPA haven't changed. This is a constitutional principle of prosecutorial independence that, Michael, I have to say, including this conversation, previous conversations that I've had with the Prime Minister and many other people around it, it's entirely inappropriate, and it is political interference. And the Prime Minister obviously can talk to whomever he wants, but what I am trying to do is to protect him. I can have a conversation with Beverly McLaughlin. I can call her right now. I'm just issuing the strongest warning I can possibly issue that decisions that are made by the independent prosecutor are their decisions. So I'm going to issue my stern warning because I can't act in a manner, and the prosecution can't act in a manner that is not objective, that isn't independent. I can't act in a partisan way, and it can't be politically motivated. All of this screams of that. So I'm actually uncomfortable having this conversation, but I'm happy to talk to you.
His view is he's not asking you to do anything appropriate or to interfere. He's asking you to use all of the tools that you lawfully have at your disposal.
I know I have a tool under the Prosecution Act that I can use. I do not believe it is appropriate to use it in this case.
Okay. All right. I mean, then that's clear. Well, I mean, he's in a very firm mood about this, so...
Does he
Right there. Right there. That's once. There's more.
understand the gravity of what this potentially could mean? This is not just about saving jobs. This is about interfering with one of our fundamental institutions. This is like breaching a constitutional principle of prosecutorial independence. So we
I
can...
don't think he sees it as bad.
That's two. He's referred to Trudeau twice.
Well, then nobody's explaining that to him, Michael.
Okay. No, I mean, I respect where you're coming from. I just think.
Okay, so this isn't the whole video. I wasn't like all the tapes. They're way too long. I don't want to take up too much of your time. This video is already going to be long. It's just so you know, this is kind of spliced versions. But just this little clip, we've already heard him twice. His name twice. Trudeau's name implicated.
You know what? I hope that you do, because I don't think anybody respects this. I mean,
that was 3.
The conversation that Jerry and Katie had with my chief of staff, and I have it, like, she wrote down what they said, like saying that they don't want to have anything or hear any more about the legalities, but want to talk about jobs. Entirely inappropriate.
Okay, well, I mean, it wasn't.
Well, I have it. I have it all. It's just.
Okay, but I mean, you're not just the Attorney General, you're the Minister of Justice in the Cabinet, and, but you have context within which you exercise your roles and responsibilities. Like, I'm not seeing anything inappropriate here, but, I mean...
That was him trying to cover his trail. I don't see anything. That's what he was saying about that law. They twisted it. Well, if we don't perceive it as such, then it isn't, because we're the government, and that's not what the law is. Intent. That's the law.
And you're right. No, and the PM, I mean, I think people
That's
are talking
4.
past each other. I think the way he sees it,
That's
the
5.
advice he's getting is that you still have things that you can do that are not interference, and they're still very much lawful. So.
It's not that they're not lawful. The perception and what will happen is it will be deemed political interference from day one, when people were talking about why are we entering into or putting a DPA regime in place. Everybody knows it was because of SNC. Whether that's true or not, that's what people think. Well, I feel that I'm giving him my best advice. And if he doesn't accept that advice, then it's his prerogative to do what he wants. But I am trying to protect the Prime Minister from political interference, or perceived or otherwise.
I understand that, but he doesn't have the power to do what he wants. All the tools are in your hands, so.
Okay, so then, I'm having thoughts of the Saturday Night Massacre here, Michael, to be honest with you. And I don't, this is not a great place for me to be in. I don't relish being in this place, but what I am confident of is that I've given the Prime Minister my best advice to protect him and to protect the constitutional principle of prosecutorial independence.
Okay. All right, but I'm worried about a collision then, because he's pretty firm about this. I just saw him a few hours ago, and this.
Right? He just keeps getting his name. Everybody knows who he's talking about. This is not the big guy. Everybody knows who he's talking about. That's implication right there. That shows guilt.
It's really important to him. And okay.
So there you go. We could be celebrating way sooner than I ever thought or hoped that we could. So I'm really hoping that this goes through, and I'm hoping that with a lot of the other corruption that's starting to become exposed, that it forces people to get in line and speak up. And that's something else that we need. We need a Whistleblower Protection Act. People are afraid to come out. Why wouldn't you be? It takes a lot of courage to come out. A lot of us media people, it takes a lot of courage to come out. But we have to. If you haven't got truth and honesty, you'll never have democracy, ever. You need transparency. You need to be able to see everything that's going on, and there never should be a point of time where the scales of justice is tipped in favor of the government. If anything, it should always be tipped in favor of the citizen. That's my thoughts. I don't know what you think. Make sure you leave a comment. I'd be curious to hear. Other than that, there's not a lot else I can really tell you. Well, there's piles. I don't want to take up too much of your time. This video is already running 45 minutes. So until next time, you guys, like, share, subscribe. Hit that notification key so you don't miss any future updates. And please, you guys, support local independent media. It is imperative. Get the word out. If people don't know, you'll never convince them. And there's no reason arguing with them if you don't get them the evidence. And we can get it to them in a very easy, polite discussion. Until next time, guys, you've been watching the Canadian Citizen Journal. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I'm Alias Tagai, and I'll see you soon.